There exists a kind of power that cannot be measured, photographed, or celebrated. It moves through the world without introduction, without credential, without the need for anyone to know its source. This is the power that terrified empires and transformed lives, yet left almost no trace of itself in history. And it all begins with a choice that most people never have the courage to make. In the year 1603, as the Tokugawa shogunate settled into its new rule, a swordmaster named Takeda Sokaku made a decision that would echo through centuries. He would not seek the position of the shogun's favored warrior. He would not build a school with his name emblazoned on its gates. He would not write treatises demanding credit for his innovations in combat. Instead, he disappeared into the mountains of Aomori, teaching only those who found him, helping only those who asked, living only for the refinement of his craft. By the time he died, nearly everyone had forgotten who he was, but the ones who learned from him never forgot what he taught. This is the paradox of true strength. The more you need others to know you have it, the less you actually possess it.
Chapter 1. The Hunger for Recognition. We live in an age of documented achievement. Every accomplishment is photographed, time-stamped, and broadcast to invisible audiences. We have been taught since childhood that visibility equals value, that being seen equals being real, that the unwitnessed victory is almost as if it never happened at all. This belief runs so deep that we do not even question it anymore. We assume that strength must be announced, that mastery must be shared, that the point of becoming exceptional is so that others might know we are exceptional. The samurai understood something different. They understood that this hunger for recognition is not ambition, it is weakness wearing the mask of ambition. Takeda Sokaku watched this hunger destroy men around him. He saw talented warriors spend their lives chasing the favor of daimyo, building reputations, accumulating titles, only to discover that their entire identity rested on external validation. The moment that validation was withdrawn, through a change in power, a shift in politics, or simple aging, these men became hollow. They had built their strength on foundations of sand, and when the tide came, there was nothing left. Sokaku realized that if he wanted to become truly dangerous, truly effective, truly free, he would have to abandon the entire system of recognition. He would have to become no one.
Chapter 2. The Way of the Gateless Gate. In Zen Buddhism, there exists a concept called the Mumonkan, the Gateless Gate. It is a teaching that suggests true freedom cannot be granted by any authority, cannot be earned through any external achievement, and cannot be taken away by any loss. The gate is gateless because there is no one standing at it to let you through. You simply walk through when you stop waiting for permission. This is the philosophical foundation upon which Sokaku built his entire existence. He did not wait for recognition to become skilled. He did not require applause to know his technique was sound. He did not need the world's confirmation to trust what he had learned in silence. This principle transforms how a person moves through life. When you abandon the need for recognition, you become impossible to control. Shame cannot touch you because you have no reputation to protect. Envy cannot reach you because you have no status to defend. Ambition no longer drives you in destructive directions because you are not competing for limited recognition. What remains is pure refinement, the sharpening of skill for its own sake, the pursuit of understanding simply because understanding is better than ignorance, the commitment to excellence because excellence is a form of respect for the craft itself. This was Sokaku's path, and it transformed him into something far more dangerous than any famous warrior could ever be.
Chapter 3. The Student Who Did Not Know He Was Being Taught. A young merchant named Isomaki came to the mountains one winter, searching for a sword teacher. He had no money, no connections, no way to impress anyone. He simply had heard stories, vague, unreliable stories, that a master lived somewhere in the snow-covered regions of the north. After months of searching, living in temples and asking villagers, he finally found a simple house where an old man sat repairing a wooden fence. Isomaki asked if this was Takeda Sokaku. The old man did not answer. Instead, he pointed to a pile of firewood and said, "The wood is wet. It will not burn until it is cut and dried." Then he walked away.
Isomaki stayed. For 6 months he cut wood. For 6 months he received no instruction in sword technique. He watched Sokaku move through his daily life, but the master never acknowledged him as a student. He cooked meals, drew water, and swept the grounds. Other men would have left, believing they had been rejected. But Isomaki began to understand something. He was being taught constantly. He was learning to observe without distraction, to work without complaint, to serve without expectation of reward. He was learning presence. When Sokaku finally placed a wooden sword in his hands one spring morning, Isomaki already knew more about himself than he had known in his entire previous life. The sword technique itself was almost secondary. The structure of his mind had already been rebuilt. Chapter 4. The Elimination of Self. There's a Zen principle called Jishuin, which translates roughly as the abandonment of self-seeking. It describes a state of consciousness where the individual ego, the constant narrator telling stories about how things should be, what you deserve, how others should treat you, falls away entirely. What remains is pure responsiveness, pure action without the interference of personal desire. Sokaku lived in this state, and it made him almost invisible to ordinary perception. He was not invisible because he hid. He was invisible because there was no one there to hide. There was only the action, only the teaching, only the moment. This is incomprehensible to someone still trapped in the ego's narrative. The modern mind cannot understand a person who does not want credit for their work, who does not need recognition for their sacrifices, who feels no resentment when others receive praise for teachings they themselves developed. We interpret such behavior as false modesty or hidden resentment, projecting our own hunger for recognition onto them. But Sokaku was not being modest. He had simply transcended the entire framework in which modesty and pride exist as opposing forces. He had moved beyond that duality entirely. This is what true strength looks like, not the strength to endure hardship while secretly wanting recognition for it, but the strength to care so little about recognition that the question becomes irrelevant. Chapter 5. The Life That Left No Mark. When Sokaku died, he left behind no official school bearing his name, no published writings explaining his methods, no legacy that could be commodified or trademarked. What he left behind was a quality of being in the few people who had learned from him directly. These students carried his influence not through texts or institutions, but through how they moved, how they made decisions, how they faced difficulty without complaint. The power had transferred invisibly, through presence rather than through words. This is how the strongest philosophies spread, not through marketing, but through people who embody them so completely that others cannot help but want to understand them. There is a story told about one of Sokaku's students, a man named Seisuke, who later became a teacher himself. A young warrior came to Seisuke and asked, "Who taught you?" Seisuke paused for a long moment and said, "I learned from the mountains. I learned from the snow. I learned from the silence." The young warrior thought this was evasion, but it was absolute honesty. Sokaku had taught so thoroughly that his teaching had become invisible, woven into the fabric of how his student perceived the world. The student no longer thought of wisdom as something that came from a named source. Wisdom had become simply how reality was, seen clearly.
Chapter 6. The Strength That Requires No Proof. We live in a time where everything must be proven, documented, and displayed. We have business cards and titles and LinkedIn profiles and verified badges. We accumulate followers as if they were currency. We mistake visibility for influence and coverage for impact. And in doing so, we have created a world where the most powerful influences are often invisible, where the most impactful teachers often have no platform, where the strongest people are sometimes the ones no one has ever heard of. This is not because of humility, it is because they have moved beyond the entire framework that made recognition necessary in the first place.
True strength is the strength to work on something for years with no guarantee of recognition. It is the strength to help someone without telling anyone about it. It is the strength to become excellent at something purely for the sake of the craft, with no expectation that your excellence will ever be celebrated. It is the strength to let someone else take credit for an idea you developed and feel nothing but peace about it. Most people cannot fathom this because they have never separated their sense of self-worth from external validation. They have never tested themselves in the darkness when no one is watching, when there will be no applause. This is where Sokaku lived every single day. This is where true power originates.
Chapter 7. The Choice. Every person reading this, every person who watches this, is making a choice right now, whether they realize it or not. They are choosing between two paths. The first path is the path of visibility. Build your name, accumulate followers, make sure the world knows what you have accomplished. This path is easier because the goal is external and measurable. You always know where you stand. The second path is harder, less visible, and infinitely more powerful. It is the path of depth. Become genuinely excellent at what you do. Help others without needing credit. Refine yourself in silence and let your influence move through the world like ripples in still water, spreading outward from an invisible center.
Sokaku chose the second path, and it cost him everything the world values. He died without fame, without wealth, without the kind of legacy that appears in history books. But he also died without the weight of a reputation to maintain, without the fear of being discovered as a fraud, without the anxiety that comes from building your identity on the approval of others. He died completely free. And the people he taught, even if they never spoke his name again, carried that freedom forward into their own lives. They became the kind of people who could not be broken, not because they were hard on the outside, but because there was no soft interior constantly seeking validation.
The samurai who chose anonymity teaches us something that modern culture will never teach us, that the inverse relationship between visibility and power. The more you need to be seen, the more fragile your strength becomes. The more you let go of needing to be seen, the more unshakable your strength becomes. This is not mysticism, it is practical psychology. An ego that requires constant feeding is an ego that is constantly vulnerable. An ego that has released its hunger for recognition is an ego that can finally rest. And when the ego rests, something else emerges: clarity, responsiveness, the ability to act without the interference of your own fear and ambition. This is what Sokaku possessed, and this is what made him truly dangerous.
You do not need to become famous to become strong. You do not need to be known to be effective. You do not need recognition to know that you are becoming who you are meant to be. The power is already there, waiting for you to stop looking for it in other people's eyes and start looking for it in the silence of your own practice. This is the teaching that has no name, passed from one invisible hand to another, waiting for you to recognize it, waiting for you to become it, waiting for you to understand that true strength has never needed an introduction. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to get more videos. Good luck!